The Detective's Impossible Case. The Hidden Heir to the Mafia. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. I still remember the night it all began. Rain poured over the city like a confession waiting to be heard. I was sitting alone in my office. The clock had just struck 11:47 p.m. My coffee had gone cold, my tie was undone, and the ashtray was full. I'd closed most of my cases that week. Small-time jobs, missing dogs, jealous husbands, nothing that could keep me awake at night. Then the phone rang. A woman's voice, trembling, elegant, but desperate. She didn't give her name. She said only 3 words that froze my blood. "He knows everything." Before I could ask who she was or what she meant, the line went dead. The strange thing is, I'd heard that same voice once before, years ago, during another case that ended badly. Something in my gut told me this wasn't just another client. This was a door opening to something I shouldn't step into. But I did anyway. By midnight, I was driving through the wet streets toward the address she left in a short, encrypted message. The place. An old mansion on the outskirts of town, long abandoned, at least according to police records. When I got there, the gates were open. The lights inside flickered like dying candles. And on the front steps, there was a letter. My name was written on it. It said, "Detective Cole Mercer, you've been chosen to solve the impossible. The truth is buried beneath blood and loyalty. Find the heir before the family does." I didn't know it then, but this would be the last case that would ever bear my name. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The next morning, I tried to track down the woman who called. No number, no record, no trace. Whoever she was, she knew how to disappear. I took the letter to my old contact in the police department, Lieutenant Ramos, a man who owed me more favors than I could count. When he saw the letter, his expression changed from curiosity to fear. He told me, "Cole, walk away. That mansion belonged to the Romano family. Mafia money. The last heir was killed 10 years ago, or so everyone thought." Romano. The name hit me like a ghost. I'd worked a case involving them before. Smuggling, laundering, the usual business. But the hidden heir. That was new. I dug through old files, newspaper clippings, and crime photos. One face stood out. Isabella Romano, the daughter of Don Angelo Romano, reported dead in a car crash in Naples 12 years ago. But no body was ever recovered. The pieces started to move. The woman on the phone. The letter at the mansion. The missing heir. Someone wanted me to find Isabella. Someone else wanted me to stay far away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at my wall of notes and photos, threads connecting names and faces, a web of secrets. And right in the center of it all, a single question glared back at me. What if the heir never died? Chapter 3. A stranger at my door. It was 2:13 a.m. when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. Hesitant. Afraid. When I opened the door, there she was, the same voice from the call. She wore a dark coat, her eyes hidden behind rain-soaked hair. But her voice, it was unmistakable. "Detective Mercer," she said, "they're watching me." I let her in. She moved like someone who'd been running for days. When she finally looked up, I saw her face clearly, and my heart skipped. It was Isabella Romano. Alive. She told me everything, or at least, what she wanted me to believe. That she'd faked her death, that her father had discovered something inside the family that terrified even him. A secret he took to the grave. And now, after all these years, someone had found out she was still alive, and they wanted her dead for good. I asked her what she wanted from me. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I need you to find out who betrayed my family, before they find me." Chapter 4. The Web Titans. Over the next few days, I followed her lead. Every trail led to another lie, every name to another corpse. The Romano family wasn't just powerful, they were untouchable. Politicians, bankers, police chiefs, all connected like strings on a puppet's hand. But one man kept appearing in every record. Marco Vasari, the family's former consigliere. He vanished after Isabella's death. Some said he'd gone into hiding. Others whispered he'd become something worse, the new shadow behind the old throne. I traced a few offshore accounts to his name. and one of them, hidden deep in encrypted transactions, led back to a small art gallery downtown, one that Isabella herself used to own before her supposed death. That's when I realized the heir wasn't just hiding from the family. She was part of it all along. Chapter 5. Bloodlines. Isabella and I met again, this time at an old cafe near the docks. She was calm, too calm. I asked her why her name was linked to those accounts. She didn't deny it. She just said, "Sometimes to destroy a monster, you have to become one." Her words stayed with me. She revealed something that turned my world upside down. Her father had discovered that one of his sons, Marco Vasari, was actually his illegitimate child. The hidden heir wasn't her. It was him. But someone reversed the story to protect his identity, and to keep Isabella as bait. My case had just become a war between two bloodlines. Chapter 6. Betrayal. By the sixth night, I realized I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was being hunted. My apartment had been searched. My phone tapped. And one of my old contacts turned up dead. Everywhere I went, I could feel eyes on me. And Isabella had disappeared again. When she finally called, her voice was shaking. "They found me, Cole. It's over." I rushed to the old Romano mansion, the same place where it all began. The gates were open again. But this time, the lights weren't flickering. They were red. Chapter 7. The Trap. Inside, I found Isabella tied to a chair, blood on her lip, eyes defiant. And behind her stood Marco Vasari, older, colder, and very much alive. He smiled like the devil himself. "Detective," he said, "thank you for bringing her back to me. You've done what none of my men could. It had all been a setup. He'd used me, through her, to flush her out." I reached for my gun, but two guards were faster. Marco leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You were chasing the wrong heir, Mercer. I'm the blood that built this empire." Chapter 8. The Escape. Somehow, I made it out alive. A fire, a broken window, and the kind of chaos that only guilt can fuel. Isabella was gone. Again. I didn't know if she'd escaped, or if she was dead. The police raided the mansion the next morning. No bodies. No evidence. Nothing. But I knew what I saw. And I knew who was behind it all. Marco had disappeared again, this time for good. Or so I thought. Chapter 9. The Truth Buried in Blood. Weeks passed. I tried to forget. But then a package arrived at my office. No sender. Inside, a photograph of Isabella, standing beside Marco. Alive. Smiling. On the back, a message in her handwriting. "Sometimes, detective, justice wears the face of a sinner." That's when I finally understood. Isabella hadn't been the victim. She had been the mastermind. She used me to find Marco, not to destroy him, but to join him. The hidden heir was her all along. Chapter 10. The Impossible Case. I never saw her again. Some nights, when the rain hits my window, I still hear her voice. "Find the heir before the family does." I did. Headphone Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. It was one of those nights when the city felt alive, but not in a good way. The kind of alive that hums under your skin, a heartbeat made of sirens, tires screeching in the distance, and the endless murmur of rain kissing the pavement. I'd been staring at my desk for hours, the dull glow of the street lamp outside cutting a crooked line across my office wall. My coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, but I was still drinking it, not for the taste, just to feel something bitter enough to match my thoughts. My name's Cole Mercer, private detective. At least, that's what it says on the cracked glass door at the end of the hallway downstairs. But most people who come to me don't care about titles. They care about truth. Or revenge. Sometimes both. That night, I was ready to call it a day. The city had been quiet. Too quiet. My last few cases had been nothing but noise without meaning. A cheating husband here, a runaway daughter there. Small stories for small lives. But I could feel it, the calm before something bigger. Something darker. The clock on the wall clicked toward midnight when the phone rang. That sound, sharp, mechanical, urgent, cut straight through the rain outside. I hesitated before picking it up. Don't ask me why. Maybe part of me already knew that call would change everything. "Mercer," I said, voice half gravel, half habit. There was silence on the other end. Then a woman's voice, soft, trembling, and wrapped in fear. "Detective. He knows everything." 3 words. That's all she said. And before I could ask who she was or what she meant, the line went dead. I sat there, frozen. The hum of the city felt distant, like I was underwater. He knows everything. Everything about what? Who was he? And why did her voice sound like a ghost I'd met before? I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. But 5 minutes later, I heard the click of my fax machine. Yeah, old-fashioned, but reliable. A single page slid out, dripping with ink and mystery. It was an address. No name, no message, just a place written in red. Ravencourt Manor, Hillside Road. I knew that name. Everyone in this city did. It was an old estate, abandoned after the Romano family scandal, the kind of story people still whispered about in bars but pretended to forget in daylight. The Romanos were once the city's untouchables, a Mafia dynasty that built empires out of fear. But 15 years ago, it all burned down. The patriarch, Don Angelo Romano, was found dead in his study, an apparent suicide. His daughter, Isabella, disappeared the same night. The press said it was a car crash in Italy. The cops said nothing. And the body was never found. So when that address landed on my desk, every instinct told me to walk away. But instincts don't pay the bills. Curiosity does. I grabbed my coat, my revolver, and what was left of my courage, and headed into the rain. The drive to Hillside Road felt longer than usual. The rain turned into sheets of silver, and the fog wrapped itself around the city like a shroud. The closer I got to the old Romano estate, the quieter it became. No cars. No lights. No life. Just the rhythmic wipers and my own breathing. When I reached the gates, I expected them to be locked. They weren't. The iron creaked as I pushed them open, a groan that echoed through the night like a warning. The driveway was swallowed by overgrown ivy and broken stones. I parked halfway up and stepped out, my shoes sinking into mud. The air smelled of wet earth and old secrets. The mansion loomed above me, 3 stories of decayed grandeur. Once white, now the color of smoke and regret. The windows were dark, except for a faint flicker in the upper left wing. Someone was home. I climbed the steps, water dripping from my hat, and there, right on the doorstep, was an envelope. Cream paper. Handwritten. My name on it. Detective Cole Mercer. I tore it open with my thumb. Inside was a letter, short, precise, and far too personal. You've been chosen to solve the impossible. The truth is buried beneath blood and loyalty. Find the heir before the family does. There was no signature. No time stamp. No explanation. Just those words, and a faint scent of perfume on the paper. The same perfume I'd smelled once in a hotel hallway years ago, when the Romano name still meant power. That was the night I'd first met Isabella Romano. The memory hit me hard, her voice, soft but sharp, her eyes like smoke and ice. I'd been investigating her father's dealings back then, and she'd warned me to stop. She said some truths weren't meant for daylight. Now, here I was again, standing in front of her ghost's house, chasing her shadow. Inside, the mansion was dead silent. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat too loud. The air was thick with dust and time. Furniture draped in white sheets stood like ghosts frozen mid-sentence. A chandelier hung cracked above the grand staircase, its crystals trembling slightly with every breath of wind. I moved carefully, flashlight sweeping through the dark. Every step creaked like the house was whispering secrets. At the end of the hall, I found a study, doors half open, papers scattered on the floor. The smell of old cigar smoke lingered, faint but real. Someone had been here recently. On the desk, an old photograph sat in a cracked frame. It showed the Romano family, Don Angelo, his wife, and a young Isabella beside them, smiling. Someone had drawn a red circle around her face. Then I noticed something else. Behind the photo frame was a small brass key taped to the back. Old habits die hard. I pocketed it. Suddenly, I heard something, a sound, faint, upstairs. A floorboard, maybe. Or footsteps. I killed the flashlight and listened. Silence. Then, another creak, closer this time. I raised my gun, slow and steady, and climbed the staircase. Each step groaned under my weight, the air colder with every inch upward. At the end of the corridor, a single door stood slightly open, light spilling through the crack. I took a breath and pushed it. The room was empty, except for a single object resting on the table, a small music box. The kind a child might own. It was already playing, a soft, haunting lullaby that twisted its way into my chest. And on the inside of the lid, written in the same elegant handwriting as the letter, were the words, "You're closer than you think." Then the music stopped, and somewhere deep in the house, a door slammed shut. I rushed downstairs, flashlight back on, heart hammering like a drum. But the entrance door was wide open, swaying in the wind. Someone had been here. Someone who knew I'd come. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the darkness. The rain had slowed, and through the mist I saw something glimmering near the gate, a pendant, half buried in mud. I picked it up. A small silver locket, engraved with the initials Heir. Inside, there was a photograph of a young girl, Isabella again, and a date scratched faintly beneath it. The date of her supposed death. The city clock struck 1 in the distance, echoing through the storm. And for the first time that night, I felt it, that electric chill that runs down your spine when you realize the line between the living and the dead is thinner than you think. I drove back to my office before dawn. The letter, the locket, the photograph, all laid out on my desk like pieces of a puzzle made of ghosts. Whoever sent that letter wanted me in the game. But I didn't know the rules yet. All I knew was that the heir, whoever they were, was alive. And someone wanted them found, or silenced. As I poured myself another cup of cold coffee, the phone buzzed again. No voice this time, just static and a whisper through the noise. "Find her, detective, before they do." Then the line went dead again. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. But the city was still bleeding secrets. And I had just opened the wound. End of Chapter 1. Approximate. 10 minutes of narration. Headphone Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. By the time morning dragged itself over the horizon, the city looked washed out, pale, tired, and half asleep. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. The rain had stopped hours ago, but its echo still haunted the streets below, dripping from rooftops and running through gutters like memories that refused to die. The locket lay on my desk, glinting under the weak light sneaking through the blinds. Heir. Isabella Romano. The supposed dead girl. The lost heir. I turned it over in my hand, wondering how many lives had been traded, silenced, or buried to protect those 2 letters. The city's full of ghosts, but some names refused to stay dead. And the Romanos. They were ghosts with money, power, and blood on their hands. I knew where to start digging. When it comes to old money and older crimes, there's always someone who remembers, someone who's seen too much and lived long enough to regret it. So, after a long shower and a longer drink, I took the letter, the locket, and my doubts, and headed for the police precinct. Lieutenant Ramos was still there, my only reliable contact in a system that eats its own. He'd been in homicide for 20 years, and he looked like it. His face carried the map of every bad night he'd ever seen. We weren't friends exactly, but we'd saved each other's necks a few times, and that counts for something in this line of work. When I walked into his office, he looked up from his paperwork and sighed. "Mercer," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Every time you show up, I lose another piece of my career." "Good morning to you too, Lieutenant," I said, closing the door behind me. He nodded toward the chair across from him. "Sit. Tell me what disaster you're babysitting this time." I tossed the letter and the photo from the mansion onto his desk. He scanned the words, frowning deeper with every line. Then he leaned back and stared at me. "Where did you get this?" "Hillside Road," I said. "Raven Court Manor." His jaw tightened. "You're telling me you went there? Are you out of your mind?" "Probably," I said. "But it's the only place that had answers. Or maybe just better lies." Ramos exhaled, long and slow. "Listen, Cole. You don't want to touch that case. The Romano family is poison. Even dead, they can still burn you. You understand. I looked at him. I'm already burned, Lieutenant. I just want to know who lit the match. He stayed silent for a moment, then reached into his drawer and pulled out a thick brown file. No label, no markings, just years of dust. He slid it across the desk. Last time anyone mentioned the Romanos, I started collecting what little we had left. But that was years ago. No one wanted it reopened. I opened the file. Newspaper clippings, crime scene photos, and a list of names. All crossed out in red ink. And there she was again. Isabella Romano, age 23. Declared dead in a car accident on the Amalfi Coast 12 years ago. But beside her name, a small handwritten note from Ramos himself. No body recovered. Evidence incomplete. I looked up at him. Why the note? He scratched his chin. Because I never believed it. That crash was too clean, too quiet. The Don's daughter dies abroad, no body, no autopsy, no questions? Doesn't smell right. But I had superiors breathing down my neck to close it fast. So I did. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You said someone contacted you. A woman. I nodded. She called me last night. Said, he knows everything. Then nothing. Voice was familiar, too. I think it was Isabella. Ramos went pale. Impossible, he muttered. Unless. He didn't finish the sentence. Just stared past me, into something only he could see. Unless what? I pressed. He shook his head. Forget it. Look, Cole, if she's alive, that means the game never ended. And if the game's still going, someone's already watching you. Back outside, the sun had finally broken through the clouds, weak and apologetic, as if afraid to light up the truth. I stood by my car, flipping through the copies of those photos. There was one image I hadn't noticed before, a man in the background of Isabella's childhood photo. Tall, suited, face turned away. But something about the posture, the ring on his hand. I'd seen it before. It took me a moment to remember where. It was from another case, years back. A smuggling operation that went sideways, run by a man named Marco Vasari. He was the Romano family's lawyer, their consigliere, and the last person seen with Isabella before her so-called death. I started to see the web forming. Isabella, Marco, the missing heir, and me, the fool tangled right in the center. I spent the afternoon at a diner across from the docks, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like engine oil but the waitresses know more about the city than half the police force. I spread my notes across the table, tracing timelines, faces, and motives. One detail kept repeating: money transfers between shell companies. One account name appeared again and again: Vasari Holdings. It led to an art gallery downtown, closed 5 years ago, now under renovation. A perfect place to hide things that shouldn't exist. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed. No caller ID. Just static, again. Then a voice, faint, trembling, the same one from last night. Detective, don't trust anyone. They're closer than you think. Isabella. I whispered, but the line cracked into silence. The waitress gave me a look. Everything all right, hon? I forced a smile. Just another ghost trying to pay me a visit. That evening, I drove to the address listed for the art gallery, Vasari and Company. Fine arts, now hidden behind scaffolding and dust. The windows were blacked out, the sign half broken, letters hanging like dead vines. I picked the lock, old habits again, and stepped inside. The air was thick with paint fumes and silence. Tarps covered half-finished sculptures. Dust danced in the faint light. But what caught my eye wasn't the art. It was a door in the back, metal, unmarked, secured by a keypad. I tried the brass key I'd found in the mansion. It didn't fit. But next to the keypad was a faint inscription, scratched into the paint, IR. The same initials. The same pattern. I pressed the letters on the keypad, one after the other, and the lock clicked. The door swung open, revealing a small office. A desk. A chair. And a single photograph pinned to the wall. It was Isabella again, older, alive, sitting beside a man whose face was hidden by shadow. And on the bottom corner of the photo, written in red ink, the words, The heir has returned. My throat went dry. If Isabella was alive, and if she wasn't the one hiding, then someone else was pulling the strings. I took the photo, slipped it into my coat, and left. But before I could reach my car, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, tinted windows, engine running. No plates. No movement. Just watching. I kept walking, pretending not to notice. But I could feel it, the eyes, the weight of someone waiting for me to make the wrong move. As I turned the corner, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, no voice, just a text. Stop digging, detective. Some graves are meant to stay closed. No signature. Just silence after that. Back in my office that night, I pinned the new photograph to the board beside the letter and the locket. The web was growing, names, faces, strings of red connecting what the world had tried to bury. And right at the center, Isabella Romano. Dead, alive, or something in between, she was the key. The heir. The ghost. The storm. I poured another drink, staring at the photo. Her eyes seemed to follow me from the wall, the same eyes that had once warned me to stop looking for truth in places where only power survived. And as I stood there in the flickering light, I realized something that sent a chill through my spine. That letter, the one that started it all, didn't say find Isabella. It said find the heir. Maybe the two weren't the same person. Maybe I was chasing the wrong ghost. Headphone Chapter 3. A stranger at my door. It was 2:13 in the morning when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. Measured. Nervous. Like someone trying to decide whether they wanted to be found. I just poured myself another glass of whiskey, the kind that tastes like fire and regret, and I wasn't expecting company. The rain had started again, whispering against the window, and the city outside looked like it had been painted over in shadows. I sat there for a second, frozen. There's a rhythm to danger. You start to feel it before it happens. And right then, every instinct I had told me that whoever was behind that door wasn't there to ask for directions. The knock came again. Louder this time. I slipped my revolver out of the drawer, safety off, and moved toward the door. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by the flicker of the old streetlight outside my window. The sound of rain dripping through the roof made it all feel like a heartbeat I couldn't control. I pressed my eye to the peephole. A woman. Soaked from the storm, hair clinging to her face. She wore a long black coat, hands trembling at her sides. But even through the blur of the glass, I recognized that face, or maybe I recognized the ghost of it. I opened the door slowly, the gun still in my hand but low, ready. "Detective Mercer," she whispered. Her voice hit me like thunder, soft, broken, but familiar. It was her. The same voice from the phone. The same voice from the mansion. "Who are you?" I asked, though I already knew. My gut had known for days. She looked up, rainwater tracing the line of her cheekbones, eyes wide and haunted. "My name," she hesitated, "is Isabella. Isabella Romano." The room went quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. I let her in. She stepped past me like a shadow unsure of where it belonged. Her clothes were soaked through, her skin pale, her movements graceful but fragile, like someone who'd spent too much time running and not enough time living. I closed the door and set my gun on the table, though not too far away. "You've got 5 seconds," I said. "Convince me you're not some ghost sent to finish what your family started." She gave me a small, exhausted smile. "If I were a ghost detective," she said, "I wouldn't be cold." Fair point. Still, I watched her every move as she took a seat by the window. The city lights reflected off her face, flickering between gold and gray. Up close, she looked older than the photos, sharper, like the world had carved its truths into her skin. But those eyes, they were the same. Smoke and ice. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "This was meant for you," she said, placing it on the table. "But not from me." The envelope was blank. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, slightly torn. It showed Don Angelo Romano sitting behind his desk, smiling. And behind him, a man standing in shadow, face hidden. But his hand was visible, a ring catching the light. The same ring I'd seen in the file photo of Marco Vasari. There was also a handwritten note on the back. He never died. He just changed his name. I looked up at her. Vasari. She nodded. He was my father's right hand, and his worst mistake. He wanted everything: power, money, the family. When my father found out, he tried to stop him. But Vasari was already ahead of him. So the suicide? I asked. Her gaze darkened. It wasn't suicide. She told me everything, or at least, the version of the story she wanted me to hear. 12 years ago, her father discovered that someone inside the family was leaking information to their enemies. When he traced the betrayal, it led straight to Vasari. The Don planned to confront him, but that night, he was found dead in his study. A gunshot wound. 1 bullet to the head. No witnesses. No prints. The next morning, Isabella's car went off a cliff on the Amalfi coast. The papers called it a tragic accident. But the woman sitting in front of me had no scars, no broken bones, no sign of ever having been in a crash. "So you faked your death," I said. She didn't answer, not with words, anyway. Just looked at me with the kind of silence that tells you the truth hurts too much to say aloud. "Why now?" I asked finally. "Why come back after all this time?" "Because," she whispered, "they found me." "Who's they?" She looked toward the window, as if the answer was somewhere out in the rain. "The ones who never stopped looking. Vasari's men. The family that shouldn't exist. He rebuilt it, piece by piece. And now he wants me gone, permanently." Her hands trembled. She clutched the pendant around her neck, a silver locket, identical to the one I'd found at the mansion. "You sent me the letter," I said. "You led me to the manor." She shook her head. "No, I didn't. That's what scares me." The room fell into silence again, the kind that settles in your bones. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a warning. I poured her a glass of whiskey, though I had the feeling she wasn't the type to drink anymore. She stared at the amber liquid for a long moment before finally saying, "I need your help, detective." "Help doing what?" I asked. "You're alive, and half the city thinks you're not. Sounds like an advantage to me." She looked at me with eyes that could have melted a glacier. "I need you to find out who betrayed my father," she said softly. "Before they find me." I wanted to say no. Every sane part of me screamed it. But sanity doesn't pay rent, and curiosity is a curse. So I nodded. "All right, Miss Romano. You've got yourself a detective." Her shoulders eased slightly, but her eyes, they stayed sharp. Watchful. Like she'd been waiting for me to say that. Like she already knew I would. She stayed that night. I offered her the couch, and she didn't argue. I sat at my desk, going through the file again, pretending to work while my mind raced in circles. If Isabella Romano had truly been hiding all these years, then someone powerful had been helping her. Fake documents, money trails, safe houses, all of it pointed to resources beyond a scared runaway. And then there was the letter. If she didn't send it, who did? Who wanted me involved in all this? By dawn, I was no closer to an answer. But I was sure of one thing: nothing about this case was what it seemed. Around 6 a.m., I heard her voice again. "Detective," she said softly from behind me, "do you believe in fate?" I turned. She was standing by the window, the first light of morning catching the edges of her hair. "Fate," I said. "No. I believe in people making bad decisions and calling it destiny later." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're both guilty." "Of what?" "Being in the wrong place," she said, "at the wrong time." After she left that morning, disappearing into the city without telling me where, I sat there staring at the empty space she'd left behind. The smell of her perfume still lingered in the air, like an echo I couldn't shake. I knew I should walk away. But I also knew I wouldn't. Not now. Not after hearing her story, seeing that fear in her eyes, and feeling something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. That's the thing about the past. It doesn't stay buried. It waits, patient, silent, until someone's foolish enough to dig it up again. And in that moment, staring at the empty couch, I realized that fool was me. That afternoon, I called Ramos. "Told you to stay out of it," he said before I could even speak. "She's alive, Lieutenant," I said. He went quiet. "Then, if that's true, Mercer, then you've just walked into a war that's been waiting 12 years for someone to bleed." "I'll take my chances," I said. "But I need everything you've got on Marco Vasari. Every record, every rumor, every corpse he's ever left behind." He sighed. "You really don't know when to quit." "No," I said. "And that's why you like me." He hung up. That night, I pinned Isabella's photo to the board, right beside her father's and Vasari's. 3 faces, 1 story. And me, standing somewhere in the middle of it, holding a thread I didn't yet understand. As I stared at that board, a single thought echoed in my head, quiet but relentless. If Isabella was telling the truth, then the man who killed her father wasn't just alive. He was still out there. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't running from him anymore. Maybe she was running toward him. Headphone Chapter 4. The Web Titans. By the time the sun set again, the city had turned back into what it always was, a graveyard of secrets dressed in neon. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the taste of metal, like the storm hadn't really gone, just stepped aside to let the night breathe. I sat in my office, surrounded by ghosts printed on paper, files, photos, cigarette smoke curling in the lamplight. Every detective has a wall like this, faces staring back at you, stories unfinished, lies tangled together until you can't tell where one ends and another begins. And right in the middle of it all, Isabella Romano, the woman who wasn't supposed to exist. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that way only haunted people can be, but because she carried something heavier than guilt or grief. She carried truth. And truth is dangerous. I started digging. Ramos had pulled a few favors, found me a thin packet of documents that smelled like burned bridges and bribes. Vasari's name showed up in all the wrong places: security companies, offshore accounts, silent partnerships in shipping and construction. All the classic laundry businesses for men who liked their money clean and their hands dirty. But there was one name that kept repeating: Evelyn Cross. An accountant. Mid-40s. No criminal record, but her address was listed in 3 of Vasari's shell companies. I decided she'd be my next stop. Her office was on the east side, old brick building, the kind of place that smelled like dust and old coffee. I knocked once, and the door opened halfway. "Yes?" she asked, eyes darting to the badge I didn't bother flashing. "Name's Mercer," I said. "Private investigator. I'm looking into the Romano case." The moment I said the name, she froze. Then she opened the door wider, as if she'd been expecting someone. Just not me. Inside, her desk was covered in ledgers, notepads, and receipts. Numbers everywhere. People like her speak in digits, clean, cold, and deadly precise. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "If he finds out." "If who finds out?" I asked, though I already knew. She swallowed hard. "Vasari." So she was in deep, maybe deeper than she wanted to be. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low, calm. "I'm not here to arrest you. I'm just trying to understand what happened to Don Romano, and what's happening now." Her eyes flicked to the window, as if expecting someone to be watching. Then she said, "You don't understand, detective. None of this ever stopped. Vasari didn't just take over. He rebuilt the family from the ashes. And he did it using the one thing everyone else forgot about." "What's that?" She looked at me, a look that could have frozen the sun. "Isabella Romano. I work for someone who wants this case to stay closed." "Vasari?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Names don't matter. Only warnings." He reached into his coat. I raised my gun, but he didn't pull one. Instead, he tossed something toward me. A photograph. When I caught it, my breath stopped. It was Isabella, alive. Standing beside a black car, wearing sunglasses, hair shorter, harder. And behind her, Vasari. When I looked up again, the man was gone. Just fog, and the echo of footsteps fading into the trees. I stared at the photo for a long time. It didn't make sense. She'd blown the place sky high. I'd seen her fall. But there she was, alive, and standing next to the man who'd tried to kill her. Maybe it wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was survival. Either way, it changed everything. Back at my office, I pinned the photo to the wall. Then I poured another drink and stared at it until the glass ran dry. Her face looked different, sharper, colder. Like the city had swallowed the girl and left behind a woman who belonged to the darkness. The phone rang again. This time, no hesitation. Mercer. A pause. Then, you found the photo. It was her. My throat tightened. Isabella. Don't look for me, she said. Her voice was quiet, controlled. You don't understand what's at stake. I watched you die. Then keep believing that. It's safer. Safe for who? For you, she whispered. Vasari's alive. You're with him. A long silence. Then, things aren't what they seem. He's not the one you should fear. Then who is? But she was gone before she answered. Just the soft hum of the line, and then nothing. For a long time, I sat there, staring at the dead phone. If she was alive, that meant the war wasn't over. And if she was working with Vasari, then there was a new enemy on the board. Someone bigger. Someone in the shadows even he was afraid of. I started digging again. Every favor, every contact, every dirty cop I'd ever bought a drink for. One name kept surfacing, the consortium. No one knew who ran it, but everyone knew what it did. Weapons, laundering, silent coups. The kind of machine that needed both the Romano fortune and Vasari's muscle to stay invisible. And maybe Isabella's mind. She wasn't hiding from me. She was protecting something, or someone. And that made her more dangerous than ever. By the time the sun went down, I had one lead. A warehouse near the East River, off the grid, off the books, and recently leased under a fake company name. I grabbed my coat, my gun, and the photograph. As I reached the door, Ramos called. You're going back out there, aren't you? Yeah, I said. Cole, listen to me, you're chasing ghosts. If she wanted to be found, she would have told you where. She did, I said. Just not in words. He sighed. You think she's playing you? I think she's playing everyone. Then I hung up. The warehouse was quiet when I got there. Too quiet. I could feel eyes on me even before I stepped inside. The door creaked open. Inside, a single light hung from the ceiling, swaying gently. On the floor, a trail of footprints led deeper in, small, deliberate. Hers. I followed. At the back of the building was a desk. On it, a single envelope with my name written across it. Inside was a note. And a key. The note read, If you want answers, come alone. Midnight. Pier 17. I looked at the key. Old brass. Stamped with a number. 47. No explanation. No clue. Just another piece in a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. I slipped it into my pocket and whispered to the empty room. All right, Isabella. One last dance. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. The kind of thunder that sounds like gunfire in the distance. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, the dead weren't done talking yet. She told me everything she knew. After the Don's death, Vasari began consolidating power. He used the rumor of Isabella's death to strengthen his grip. The family needed a new figurehead, someone ruthless, someone alive. But behind closed doors, he never stopped searching for her. He didn't want her gone. He wanted her found. Why? I asked. If she's the rightful heir, wouldn't she be a threat? Evelyn hesitated. Because she has something he doesn't. And what's that? She leaned closer. The codes. I frowned. Codes for what? The Romano accounts, she whispered. Hundreds of millions hidden across Europe and the States. The old Don kept them locked away, accessible only with two parts of a cipher. One he kept for himself, the other he gave to Isabella. And I'm guessing when he died, both halves went missing. She nodded. Until now. That was the moment I knew I'd walked into something much bigger than a cold case. Money. Power. Bloodlines. It was never about justice, it was about inheritance. I thanked her, slipped my card across the table. If you remember anything else, call me." She gave me a tight smile, but her hands were trembling. Something about the way her eyes kept shifting to the clock made my stomach twist. I left her office feeling like I'd just pulled a thread in a web that was ready to snap. 2 hours later, Ramos called. "You still digging?" he said. "Always," I replied. "You find anything on Vasari's current holdings?" He hesitated, a bad sign. "Yeah. And you're not gonna like it. He owns a private security company called Black Serpent International. Operates out of the docks. Mercenaries, ex-cops, the kind of guys who think morality is a suggestion." "Sounds like my kind of party," I said. "Mercer, listen, Evelyn Cross, the accountant you visited? She's dead." I stopped walking. The night suddenly felt colder. "What do you mean, dead?" "Car bomb. 30 minutes ago." I didn't respond. Couldn't. The sound of the city around me faded, replaced by the echo of her voice. "If he finds out." Someone had found out. And they'd made sure she wouldn't talk again. I turned back toward my car, rain beginning to fall once more, soft, almost apologetic. This city has a way of washing away evidence, but never guilt. Back at my office, I poured another drink and stared at the board again. Every time I thought I understood the pattern, it changed. Every time I thought I was one step ahead, I realized I'd been running in circles. Then I noticed something, a small detail I hadn't seen before. In one of the old crime scene photos from the Romano estate, there was a statue in the corner, an angel holding a sword. On the base of it, barely visible, were engraved letters, E.C. Evelyn Cross. She hadn't just been an accountant. She'd been there. Maybe even that night. The phone rang. At first, I thought it was Ramos again. But when I picked up, the voice on the other end was soft. Familiar. "Detective Mercer," she said. "You shouldn't have gone to her." "Isabella." "Yes," she whispered. "You're in danger." I almost laughed. "That's my day job." "I'm serious. Evelyn was one of ours, my father's people. She helped me disappear after the funeral. If she's dead, it means Vasari's getting desperate. He's closing the circle." I leaned back in my chair. "Then maybe it's time someone breaks it." "You can't fight him, detective. He owns half the city." "Good," I said. "That makes him easier to find." She sighed, a sound like rain on glass. "There's something I need to show you," she said. "Tomorrow. Midnight. Pier 47. And before I could answer, she hung up. Pier 47. The docks. Black Serpent territory. Either she was walking into a trap, or she was setting one. Either way, I'd be there. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evelyn's face, that flicker of fear, the clock ticking behind her, the quiet confession that had gotten her killed. When dawn came, I shaved, put on my best coat, loaded my revolver, and told myself this was just another job. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Not because of Isabella. Not even because of the dawn. Because someone out there thought they could control life and death like pieces on a chessboard, and I was tired of watching the game. That night, I drove to the docks. The air smelled like salt, rust, and secrets. Fog rolled in thick, swallowing the edges of the pier. A single light flickered at the far end, casting long shadows across the water. She was there, Isabella, standing by the railing, her coat fluttering in the wind. When she turned, her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world felt painfully quiet. "You came," she said. "You asked," I replied. She handed me a small object, a flash drive, sleek and black. "This," she said, "is part of the cipher. My father's records. Bank codes, transfers, everything Vasari's been after. And the other half? Hidden," she said. "But he's close. Too close." Before I could ask where, I heard it, the low hum of an engine, headlights cutting through the fog. A black SUV rolled up the pier, slow and deliberate. "Friends of yours?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not tonight." The doors opened. 3 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits, guns visible beneath their coats. The kind of men who didn't need to speak, Their silence was the threat. "Run," I told her. She hesitated. "Now, Isabella." She bolted toward the side stairs as I drew my gun and fired. The first man dropped. The second ducked behind a crate, returning fire. Bullets cracked through the mist, sparks flying off the metal railings. I dove behind a cargo container, heart hammering, the ocean roaring in my ears. Another shot, closer this time. I returned fire, once, twice, until the echoes faded. Then silence. When I looked up again, the SUV was gone. And so was Isabella. I found the flash drive on the ground, glinting in the dim light. Blood smeared on one side, hers or mine, I couldn't tell. I pocketed it and stood there, the fog closing in around me like the curtain at the end of a bad play. The case had started with a mystery. Now it was war. That night, back in my office, I stared at the drive for hours. I knew what was inside could answer every question. Who killed Don Romano, what Vasari was hiding, and why Isabella had really come back. But I also knew once I opened it, there'd be no going back. I poured another drink, lit a cigarette, and whispered to no one. "Welcome to the deep end, Mercer." Then I slid the drive into the computer. Headphone Chapter 5, Bloodlines and Betrayals. The screen flickered to life, the hum of the hard drive the only sound in the room. For a moment, I thought the flash drive was empty, just another dead end dressed as a clue. Then a folder appeared, Romano Legacy. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of files, encrypted documents, financial statements, offshore accounts. But one stood out, a video file, dated 12 years ago. The night of Don Angelo Romano's death. I clicked it. Static. Then the image sharpened, the Romano study, dimly lit, cigar smoke hanging in the air like fog. Don Angelo sat behind his desk, his face calm but tired, eyes heavy with something deeper than fear, resignation. And across from him was Marco Vasari. Even through the grainy quality, I could feel the tension, the kind of silence that always comes before something irreversible. "Don Angelo, you've been like a son to me, Marco. But a son doesn't poison his own blood. Vasari, your way is dying, old man. You built this family on loyalty. I'll build it on power. Don Angelo, power without honor is nothing. Vasari, laugh softly, then you'll die with your honor." The Don reached for a drawer. Vasari moved faster, gun drawn, one clean shot. The Don fell back in his chair. Silence. A drop of blood hit the desk like a metronome marking the end of an empire. Then, movement. A young woman stepped into the frame, eyes wide, trembling. "Isabella." She screamed his name. Vasari turned, startled, gun still smoking. "Vasari, you shouldn't have seen that, Bella." "Isabella, you killed him. He trusted you." "Vasari, and now he's free. You will be too, if you forget this ever happened." He raised the gun again. But before he could fire, the screen went black. I sat there frozen, heart hammering. The truth was there, raw, undeniable. Vasari had murdered the Don. Isabella had witnessed it. The rest of the files painted the aftermath, forged reports, doctored coroner's notes, bribes to police officials. And one final document, a will. Don Angelo Romano's last testament. It named his heir not just as Isabella Romano, but as Isabella Romano Vasari. I read it twice, trying to make sense of the name. Then it hit me like a bullet between the eyes. Vasari wasn't just the Don's right hand. He was Isabella's uncle. I leaned back in my chair, the cigarette burning down between my fingers. So that was it. This wasn't just business. It was blood. He hadn't killed the Don to destroy the family, he'd killed him to inherit it. And Isabella, the only surviving heir, was the one piece he couldn't control. A knock at the door snapped me out of it. It was Ramos. He looked worse than usual, tired eyes, coffee in one hand, a file in the other. "Mercer," he said, closing the door behind him, "you need to see this." He dropped a folder on my desk. Inside, photos. Surveillance shots. Isabella at the docks. Isabella with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, sharp suit, scar under his left eye. "Who's that?" I asked. Ramos sighed. Name's Luca D'Angelo. Works for Vasari. Used to handle international shipments. We caught him on a camera near Pier 47 last night, right after the shooting. So Vasari sent him. Maybe. Or maybe she did. I frowned. You think Isabella's playing both sides? He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I think you want to believe she's innocent. But you and I both know women like that don't survive this long by being honest. I wanted to argue, but he was right about one thing. In this city, innocence didn't last 12 years. Still, something didn't fit. If Isabella wanted Vasari dead, she wouldn't have risked meeting me. If she wanted him alive, she wouldn't have handed me that flash drive. She was caught between them, and I was caught with her. That night, I sat in my car outside Vasari's newest property, a private club downtown called the Serpent's Denver. The kind of place where deals were sealed with handshakes and blood oaths. The doorman looked like he could break my neck just by thinking about it. But he recognized the badge I flashed. Old habits die hard. Once inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and money. At the far end of the room sat Marco Vasari himself. Age hadn't softened him. If anything, it had sharpened every edge. Silver hair slicked back, tailored suit, smile like a knife. The kind of man who never looked surprised, because he was always 10 steps ahead. He saw me instantly. "Well, well," he said, his accent smooth as velvet. "Detective Mercer. I was wondering when you'd find your way to my door." I took a seat opposite him. No drinks. No smiles. Just the truth between us. "You killed Angelo Romano," I said flatly. His grin didn't waver. "That's a bold accusation. I've got proof. A video. And I think you know who gave it to me." He leaned forward slightly. "Ah, my dear niece." "Your niece," I repeated. "So the rumors are true." He nodded once, eyes gleaming. "Angelo's brother's daughter. Tragic, really. She had such potential. But she was never strong enough to lead." I kept my voice steady. "She saw you kill her father." For the first time, his expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. Then he smiled again. "You think you know everything, detective. But Isabella, she's not the victim you believe she is." "What do you mean?" He rose from his chair, adjusting his cufflinks. "She's not just the heir. She's the one who gave me the gun." The words hit like a thunderclap. "That's a lie," I said. "Is it?" His eyes glittered. "She hated him. Said he was weak, sentimental. She wanted freedom, and I gave it to her. But when she realized what that freedom cost, she ran." I stood up. "You expect me to believe she helped you kill her own father?" He smiled. "I expect you to believe nothing. But you should ask yourself, detective, who sent you that letter? Who made sure you found her? Who made sure you'd chase this case until your own hands were bloody?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I'd already started asking myself those same questions. I left the club, the echo of his laughter following me out into the rain. My thoughts spun like broken glass. If Vasari was lying, it meant he was desperate. If he was telling the truth, then I'd been played. Back at my apartment, I poured another drink, trying to drown the noise in my head. The video, the will, Isabella's tears, they all started blurring together. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. I turned, gun raised, but it was her. Isabella. Soaked again, shaking, eyes red from crying. "Cole," she whispered. "You went to him." I nodded. "I had to. He said you were there that night." "That you." "That I what?" she snapped. "Helped him. You think I gave him the gun." Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned. "I was 17, Cole. He used me. Told me he needed protection. I didn't know what he was going to do. When I realized, it was too late." Tears streamed down her face. "I ran because I couldn't live with what I'd done." The room went silent again. I lowered the gun. I wanted to believe her. God, I did, but the truth was a double-edged blade. Every answer cut deeper. Finally, I said, "He's after the second half of the cipher." "Where is it?" Isabella. She hesitated, then reached for her locket. This, she said. It's always been with me. She opened it, revealing a small microchip, hidden beneath the photograph of her father. He doesn't know, she whispered. He can't. I took it gently from her hand, my mind racing. If both halves of the cipher were together now, we had the key, to the money, to the truth, maybe even to ending this once and for all. But before I could say another word, the window shattered. Gunfire tore through the room. I tackled Isabella to the floor as bullets ripped through the walls, glass raining down like diamonds. When it stopped, the night was still again, except for the distant sound of an engine speeding away. She clung to me, trembling. They found us. I looked at the hole in the wall where the bullet had passed an inch from my head and muttered, "Yeah, and they're done knocking." As the sirens wailed in the distance, I knew the time for digging was over. This wasn't about investigation anymore. It was about survival. The web had tightened, around her, around me, around the truth. And whoever had spun it was about to feel it snap. Headphone Chapter 6, The Trap at Midnight. The city never really sleeps, it just pretends to. Underneath the hum of streetlights and the sirens echoing through wet alleys, it breathes, slow and heavy. Like a beast waiting for someone to make the wrong move. That night, the beast had our scent. Isabella sat in the passenger seat beside me, silent, staring out at the rain-streaked windows. The locket, the last piece of her father's legacy, hung loosely around her neck, glinting each time the headlights caught it. I could see the reflection of her eyes in the windshield, haunted, tired, but burning with something new. Determination. Or maybe vengeance. We'd been driving for hours, trying to stay one step ahead of whoever had come for us. The city blurred into an endless stream of neon and darkness. Finally, I broke the silence. "Where do you want to go?" She didn't turn her head. "Somewhere safe." "There's no such place anymore," I said. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then somewhere quiet, at least." We ended up in an abandoned warehouse near the docks, one of those forgotten places where the city stores its sins. I'd used it before, years ago, when a case went south and I needed a place no one would look. The walls were cracked, the floor covered in dust, and the air smelled like rust and rainwater. Perfect. I killed the engine and turned to her. "We need to plan our next move. Vasari knows we've got both halves of the cipher. That makes us the most valuable and the most disposable people in the city." She nodded slowly. "Then we use that." "Use it how?" She met my eyes. "As bait." The plan was simple and suicidal. We'd leak word through a contact of mine that we were willing to sell the full Romano accounts. Set a meeting. Draw Vasari out. Ramos would have called it reckless. He would have been right. But we didn't have time for cautious moves anymore. The noose was already tightening, and sometimes the only way out is to pull it tighter yourself. While Isabella rested, I set up what little gear I had left: burner phone, recording device, backup weapon. I glanced over at her as she slept on the old couch. For the first time, she looked peaceful. Almost human again. It's strange. You spend your life chasing truth, and when you finally find it, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like grief. Because truth always costs something. And I was starting to realize the price here might be her life, or mine. The next morning, I made the call. A fixer named Rollo answered, the kind of man who could get you a silencer, a passport, or a priest, depending on what you asked for. "Mercer," he said. "Didn't expect to hear your voice again. Heard you were dead." "Not yet," I replied. "But I might be soon. I've got something Vasari wants." That got his attention. "You serious?" "Serious enough to risk calling you. Spread the word. The Romano cipher's complete. If Vasari wants it, tell him to meet me tomorrow night. Midnight. The old observatory on Blackridge Hill." He whistled softly. "You're out of your mind, Mercer." "Probably," I said. "Just make sure he hears it." After I hung up, Isabella walked over, arms crossed. "You trust this Rollo?" "No," I said. "But I trust greed. It always gets the message through." She nodded, then looked at the gun on the table. "What if he brings an army? Then we'll make sure they remember us." For a moment, she almost smiled. But behind that half-smile was something else, fear. Not of dying, of what might come after. That night, we didn't sleep. She told me stories about her father, how he used to read her the Count of Monte Cristo before bed, how he believed that power meant nothing without mercy. Then her voice grew softer. When he died, she said, I promised I'd never let his name become a curse. I looked at her. And you haven't. Not yet. She met my eyes, her expression unreadable. You don't know me, Cole. Maybe not, I said. But I've known ghosts like you. And they all want the same thing. What's that? Peace. Even if they don't deserve it. She looked away after that, but I caught the shimmer of tears she tried to hide. The next day dragged on like a lifetime. By dusk, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. Blackridge Hill loomed over the city like an old god waiting to pass judgment. The observatory sat at its peak, abandoned for years, its dome cracked, its telescope long gone. When the clock hit 11:50, we were there. Just two lost souls in a building full of echoes. I checked my watch, my gun, then the small flash drive in my pocket, both halves of the cipher, joined at last. Beside me, Isabella was calm. Too calm. You ready? I asked. She nodded. I was born ready for this. The sound of engines reached us first. Then headlights cut through the fog, slicing up the hill like a blade. Two SUVs stopped outside the observatory gate. The doors opened, and men poured out, black suits, black guns, black hearts. Vasari was the last to step out. He looked up at the building with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mercer, he called, voice echoing through the night. Let's end this. We waited until he was inside before making our move. He stood under the cracked dome, rain dripping through the ceiling onto the marble floor. Behind him, his men fanned out. 6, maybe 7. Too many. He looked around like he was admiring a painting. Fitting place, he said. A monument to something that used to see everything, before it went blind. I stepped into the light. Seems poetic. He grinned. You've been busy, detective. And here I thought you worked alone. He turned slightly, enough for his eyes to find her. Ah, my niece. I was wondering when you'd stop hiding. Isabella stepped forward, her voice steady. It ends tonight, Marco. He chuckled. Oh, Bella. Always so dramatic. I tossed the flash drive onto the floor between us. It slid across the marble like a coin flipping through fate. There's your inheritance, I said. Everything you killed for. He bent down slowly, picking it up. And what do you want, Mercer? Justice, I said. But I'll settle for the truth. He pocketed the drive, smiling. You already have it. I killed Angelo because he was weak. The world doesn't need saints, it needs survivors. Then why chase her all these years? I asked. Why not just let her vanish? His smile faded. Because she's the last piece of him left. And I couldn't let him win, not even in memory. The next few seconds unfolded in silence. Then Isabella reached into her coat, not for a gun, but for the locket. She opened it, revealing the microchip glinting inside. You were right, Uncle, she said softly. The world doesn't need saints. But it needs to remember them. Before he could react, she snapped the locket shut and pressed a small button on the side. A high-pitched beep filled the room. Vasari's eyes widened. What did you? The lights exploded in a flash. Smoke. Fire. Screams. I grabbed her arm, pulling her down behind the pillars as bullets ripped through the air. The observatory shook, chunks of stone raining from above. She'd wired the place, trip charges, detonators, all rigged to the locket. When the smoke cleared, only 2 figures were left standing. Vasari, blood on his face, fury in his eyes, and me. He raised his gun. You should have stayed out of this, detective. Probably, I said, and fired first. The bullet hit his shoulder. He stumbled back, cursing, the flash drive falling from his hand. Isabella moved fast, kicking it toward me. Go, she shouted. I shook my head. Not without you. Go, she screamed again, and then another explosion ripped through the floor beneath her. The world turned white. When I came to, the sky was full of ash and rain. The observatory was gone, half collapsed, smoke rising like ghosts into the night. I crawled through the debris, calling her name. No answer. Just silence. And the echo of fire dying in the rain. In the rubble, I found the locket, twisted, burned. The microchip inside, shattered. And beside it, a single gold ring, engraved with the initials AR. Angelo Romano. Her father's ring. By the time Ramos and the fire trucks arrived, Vasari was gone. Vanished. No body, no blood trail, just smoke and rumor. Ramos looked at me, shaking his head. "You look like hell." "Feel worse," I said, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. He stared at the ruins. "You find her?" I didn't answer. Just looked at the ring in my palm and said, quietly, "She found what she was looking for." Later, back in my office, I sat alone, the rain tapping on the window, the city humming its eternal song. On my desk, the flash drive lay cracked in half. Whatever was on it, whatever fortune or power it held, it was gone now. Maybe that was for the best. I poured myself one last drink and whispered to the empty room. She wanted to end her father's curse. And she did. But in the distance, in the faint reflection on the glass, I swore I saw her, Isabella, standing at the edge of the streetlight, watching. And then she was gone. That's the thing about ghosts. You never really know if they're gone, or just waiting to return when the night is quiet enough to hear them. End of Chapter 6. Approximate. 10 minutes of narration. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 7, Shadows of the Dead, where Mercer begins to uncover clues suggesting Isabella may still be alive, and that the war isn't over yet? Você diz. Sim. Oh, ChatGPT diz. Perfect. Here begins Chapter 7, Shadows of the Dead, written as a full 10-minute first-person audiobook segment, is almost equal to 900 words. The tone remains noir and cinematic, continuing the tension and emotional depth of the story. Headphone Chapter 7, Shadows of the Dead. It's strange how quiet the world gets after an explosion. Not just in your ears, in your soul. Everything slows down. The noise, the chaos, the fear. It all folds into a single question that refuses to leave you alone. What if she's still out there? It had been 2 weeks since the observatory burned. 2 weeks since the night Isabella Romano vanished into the flames, and took the last piece of truth with her. But I couldn't let it go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there, locket in hand, rain in her hair, a half-smile that said she knew something I didn't. And maybe she did. My office hadn't changed. Same cracked blinds, same whiskey stains, same broken clock that never ticked right. The city outside moved on without me, it always does. But something about the silence felt wrong. Like the city was holding its breath. I poured a drink, sat back in my chair, and stared at the file on my desk. The Romano case. The one that started it all. The one that ended too neatly. Inside were photos, burnt ruins of the observatory, grainy shots of Vasari's men, and one blurred image that kept me awake at night. A woman. Half hidden in the smoke, walking away from the wreckage. Isabella. Maybe. Or maybe my guilt was just playing tricks on me. The phone rang. I nearly ignored it. These days, good news didn't know my number. But something in my gut told me to pick up. Mercer. Static. Then a voice, low, calm, familiar. You shouldn't have come back. I froze. Who is this? No answer. Just a click, then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a long time before hanging up. Whoever it was knew me. And they didn't sound like a ghost. The next day, I went to see Ramos. He was sitting at his desk, nursing a cup of bad coffee and a worse mood. "Cole," he said without looking up. "You look like you've been sleeping in an ashtray." "Close," I said, dropping the file onto his desk. "You seen this?" He glanced at it, sighed. "Still on that case, huh? Thought we buried it." "Maybe you did," I said. "I didn't." He looked up, eyes narrowing. "You think she's alive?" "I don't know. But someone called me last night, someone who knows what happened." Ramos rubbed his temples. Cole, you're chasing ghosts. Half the city thinks you're obsessed. Half the city doesn't know how to listen, I said. Someone wants me off this. That means there's still something to find. He leaned back in his chair. You ever think maybe they just want you to stay alive? I didn't answer, because he was probably right. But obsession's a funny thing. It doesn't care if you live or die. It just wants you to keep looking. By nightfall, I was walking through the docks again. The air was thick with salt and diesel, the kind of smell that sticks to your skin. I found the warehouse where Isabella and I had planned the trap, now half bored, half forgotten. Inside, everything was as we'd left it. The couch, the empty bottles, the faint outline of a map we'd drawn on the wall. Only one thing was different. A note, pinned to the wall with a knife. It was written in neat, careful handwriting. Stop digging, detective. You already buried yourself. Underneath, a small object dangled from the knife's handle. A gold chain. Broken. Isabella's. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the explosion in my head, every flash, every sound, every second of her voice shouting for me to run. But there was something I'd missed. Something about her tone. It hadn't been fear. It had been command. Like she wanted me to get out. Like she'd planned it. I pulled out the ring I'd found in the ruins, Angelo Romano's. I hadn't noticed it before, but inside the band, beneath the initials, there were tiny etchings. Numbers. Coordinates. By morning, I was halfway across town. The coordinates led to an old cemetery on the outskirts, the kind where even the dead don't want to be found. Fog hung low over the ground, curling around the stones like smoke. The place was silent except for the crows. I followed the numbers until I reached an unmarked grave. Fresh dirt. Too fresh. Someone had been here recently. Kneeling down, I brushed away the loose soil. No name, no flowers, just a small metal plaque with 3 letters scratched into it. B.R. Bella Romano. My stomach dropped. She'd buried herself. Or someone wanted me to think she had. Behind me, gravel crunched. I turned, slow, hand on my gun. A man stood there. Tall, thin, wearing a long black coat and a fedora pulled low. His face was lost in shadow, but his voice was smooth as oil. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Depends who's asking, I said. He stepped closer, the fog parting around him. Chapter 8, Pier 17, The Meeting. The night the city went silent, I found myself standing on the edge of the river, where the water reflects every lie the skyline tells. Pier 17 was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your bones and tells you something's about to happen. Fog rolled in from the bay, swallowing the lamps one by one until the world was nothing but mist and memory. I checked my watch. 11:55. 5 minutes till midnight. 5 minutes till I met the woman who died in my arms. The brass key she'd left me hung from my fingers. Number 47. No idea what it opened. Maybe a door, maybe the past. Maybe both. I'd parked the car 3 blocks away. No headlights, no trail. If she was still working with Vasari, this could be an ambush. If she wasn't, it could be something worse, the truth. The sound of waves against the pier mixed with the low moan of the foghorn. I felt the weight of my gun under my coat, cold and familiar. It had seen too many nights like this. When the clock struck 12, I heard footsteps. Soft. Measured. Familiar. She appeared through the fog like a ghost returning to collect a debt. Hello, detective. Her voice hadn't changed. Smooth, calm, like silk covering a blade. But she looked different. The girl I'd known had vanished. This woman was all steel. Shorter hair, darker eyes, no trace of the fear she used to wear. Even the way she stood, poised, controlled, said she'd crossed a line she wasn't coming back from. Isabella, I said. You're real. She smiled faintly. You sound disappointed. I watched you die. You watched what you were supposed to see. She took a step closer, the fog curling around her like smoke. I needed you to believe it, Cole. Everyone did. Everyone. Including Vasari. She nodded. Especially him. I didn't move. You're going to have to explain that. She looked past me, toward the dark water. Do you know what happens when you cut the head off a monster? It grows another one, I said. Exactly. I thought if I killed Vasari, the consortium would crumble. But he wasn't the top. He was a middleman. Just another pawn on the board. And now? I asked. You working for them? Her eyes snapped to mine. I'm inside them. For now. Under cover. Under siege, she said softly. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of oil and seaweed. She reached into her coat, and I tensed, but instead of a weapon, she pulled out a small black flash drive. You were right, she said. The Romano fortune wasn't just money. It was leverage, blackmail files, account transfers, everything tying the consortium to governments and crime families across Europe. Vasari wanted it. I hid it. I stared at the drive. And you're giving it to me? She shook her head. Not yet. Not until I finish what I started. You don't have to do this alone, I said. Her smile was sad. You still think this is about choice? From the shadows behind her, a sound, a metal click. Instinct. I pulled my gun, stepped forward. But before I could speak, another figure emerged from the fog. Vasari. Alive. Smiling like the devil found his reflection. Well, he said, voice low and amused, isn't this touching? I raised my gun higher. You should be dead. I've been hearing that for years, detective. And yet, here we are. He stepped closer, flanked by 2 armed men. Isabella didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Put the gun down, Cole, she said quietly. Please. Tell me why. Because, she said, eyes glistening, he's not my enemy anymore. That hit harder than any bullet. What the hell are you talking about? Vasari chuckled. We both serve the same master now. The consortium. Your lovely Isabella here is quite the asset. She's not. She is, he cut me off. And she's done more damage from within than you ever could from the outside. I turned to her. Tell me he's lying. She didn't. Didn't have to. The silence said everything. I lowered my gun an inch. Why? Because, she whispered, it's the only way to destroy them. Vasari laughed, the sound echoing off the water. You see, detective? She's learned that to kill a beast, you must first wear its skin. She's using you, I said. He smirked. I'm using her. It's a beautiful arrangement. My finger twitched on the trigger, but Isabella stepped between us. Don't, she said. If you shoot him, we both die. I froze. What? She looked at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen before. Guilt. They've been watching us, Cole. Every move. Every call. This meeting was bait. Not just for you, for them. If I kill him, the signal goes out. They'll erase us both. Who's they? The board, she said. The real heads of the consortium. I glanced at the flash drive in her hand. What's on that? Their names. Their faces. The key to ending this. Then give it to me. I can't, she said. Not yet. It's encrypted, tied to a biometric signature. Whose? She hesitated. Mine. Vasari smiled. And that's why she's still alive. He stepped forward, close enough for me to smell the smoke on his clothes. You see, Mercer, she's not the heir anymore. She's the lock. And I'm the only one who knows the key. I raised my gun again. Then I guess I'll take both. Before he could answer, the world exploded in motion. Headlights, gunfire, chaos. Black SUVs screeched up onto the pier, doors bursting open. Men in tactical gear poured out, shouting orders, rifles up. The consortium had arrived. Vasari's men returned fire. Bullets sliced through the fog like lightning. Move! Isabella shouted, grabbing my arm. We dove behind a cargo crate as splinters flew overhead. Tell me there's a way out of this, I said. There's one, she said, pulling the brass key from her pocket. Storage Unit 47. North end of the pier. You mean this? I held up the identical key she'd sent me. Her eyes widened. You kept it. Didn't think I'd need a spare for my own funeral. We sprinted through the chaos, ducking between crates as bullets sparked off the metal around us. Vasari's voice roared somewhere behind us. Get them both. Alive. We reached the far end, a line of rusted storage units, doors chained shut. I found 47. Jammed the key in. It turned with a click. Inside, a small boat. Engine running. Waiting. You planned this, I said, panting. Always have an exit, she said. We jumped in. She hit the throttle. The boat shot forward, slicing through the fog as gunfire echoed behind us. Water sprayed my face, cold and sharp. In the distance, the pier vanished into the mist, swallowed whole. We didn't speak for a long time. The city lights faded, replaced by the dark silhouette of open water. Finally, I said, You gonna tell me where we're going? Somewhere safe. I laughed bitterly. You said that last time. She smiled faintly. And yet you're still alive. I looked at her, really looked. The hard edges, the exhaustion, the fear she hid behind control. She wasn't the same woman I'd met weeks ago. Neither was I. When the engine finally cut, we drifted in silence. She turned to me. You shouldn't have come tonight. You invited me. I warned you. You left me no choice. She sighed, looking out over the black waves. I didn't want you in this. The moment you stepped back into the case, they marked you. They already had. Her voice softened. You don't understand, Cole. The consortium isn't just criminals. They own senators, generals, entire governments. If I fail, there won't be a world left to save. And if you succeed? I asked. She looked back at me. Then I disappear for good. A silence settled between us, heavy, final. I reached into my coat, pulling out the ring I still carried. Her father's. I held it out to her. He wouldn't want you to become what he fought against. Her hand trembled as she took it. He also wouldn't want me to die for nothing. She closed her fist around it, then looked at me, eyes wet, voice barely a whisper. You were the only person who ever saw me as more than a name. And you were the only case I ever cared about. For a moment, the war around us didn't matter. Just two broken souls staring at the ruins of what they used to be. Then her radio crackled. A male voice, distorted. Target confirmed. Intercept coordinates locked. Her eyes went wide. They found us. Before I could react, a spotlight cut through the fog, a helicopter overhead, searchlights sweeping the water. She grabbed my arm. Get down. Gunfire rained from above, tearing through the hull. She reached for the throttle, but it was too late. The engine exploded. We hit the water hard. Cold. Black. Silent. When I surfaced, coughing, the world was fire and light. The boat was gone. The helicopter hovered above, searchlights slicing across the waves. I looked around wildly. Isabella! No answer. Just the hiss of burning fuel. Then, faintly, through the chaos, her voice. Cole, go. I saw her, clinging to a piece of wreckage, blood on her face, still holding the flash drive. Before I could reach her, a figure leaned out of the helicopter, Vasari. He shouted something I couldn't hear, and then she was gone, pulled into the aircraft as it rose into the sky. I screamed her name until my voice broke. But all that answered me was the wind. By dawn, the river was calm again. The only trace left of the battle was smoke, silence, and me, the detective who couldn't save the girl twice. I dragged myself onto the shore, lungs burning, heart hollow. Somewhere above, the sun began to rise, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like the beginning of something darker. Because now I knew two things. Isabella Romano was still alive. And the consortium had her. And they'd just declared war. When I opened my eyes that morning, the city felt strangely quiet, as if the noise of the world had been silenced just for me to listen to my own heartbeat. The investigation had finally reached its breaking point. Every clue, every deception, every ghost of the past, it all led to today. I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the dawn crawl between the buildings. The same streets that once smelled of rain and blood now looked peaceful. But I knew better. Peace was never real in this city. It was only the silence before another storm. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat down, and opened the folder I'd been avoiding for days. Case 312, The Hidden Heir. Inside were photos, statements, and a single name circled in red. A name I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. Because it wasn't just a suspect anymore. It was someone I had come to care about. Elena. The girl I had protected, trusted, and maybe even started to love, was the daughter of the man I'd spent my entire life hunting, the most ruthless mafia boss in the city's history. Her father, Victor Moretti, had disappeared 20 years ago, leaving behind chaos, death, and a fortune hidden somewhere in Europe. And his daughter, raised under another name, another life, had been living right under my nose. When I found her, she didn't know who she truly was. Or maybe, she didn't want to know. That morning, I received a call. The voice on the other end was calm, sharp, and familiar. "Detective Cole," the voice said. "We found her. She's waiting for you at the pier." The pier. The same place where everything began. I drove there in silence, my mind looping through every memory. Every time Elena had hesitated to answer questions about her past, every strange look, every time she asked me if justice was ever worth the cost. Now I understood why she'd asked. The sun was rising when I reached the docks. A thin mist floated over the water, and the waves whispered against the wooden planks. She was there, standing by the edge, wearing a black coat, the wind blowing her hair across her face. "Elena," I said softly. She turned around, her eyes full of something between sorrow and strength. "So you finally know," she whispered. "I didn't want to believe it," I admitted. "But the DNA, the documents, everything points to you. You're Victor Moretti's daughter." She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I didn't choose this, Cole. I never wanted to inherit his world." "I know." We stood in silence for a moment. The city behind us was waking up, unaware that its darkest secret was about to surface. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is what he left me," she said. "It's the key to his accounts, his properties, everything. I could have disappeared with it. But I want to end this the right way." She handed me the envelope. Her hand trembled slightly. "You're the only one I trust to do it." I took it, but the weight of it felt unbearable. "If I turn this in, your name will be exposed. You'll lose everything." "I already lost everything," she said quietly. "My childhood, my peace, my father. Maybe this is the only way to get it back." The police sirens echoed in the distance. They were coming for her. "Elena," I said, "you can still run." She shook her head. "No. I'm done running." The officers arrived, and I stood between them and her, holding up my badge. "Let me talk to her alone," I said. They hesitated but agreed. She looked at me one last time. "Cole, thank you. For seeing the person I was, not the blood I carry." I swallowed hard. "I'll make sure they know the truth." She nodded, and they took her away. Hours later, I sat in the precinct, staring at her file one last time. The case was officially closed, Case 312, The Hidden Heir to the Mafia. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. Before I left, I opened the envelope. Inside, besides the bank codes, was a letter, written in Victor Moretti's own handwriting. "To my daughter, Elena. If you are reading this, I am gone. I never wanted this life for you. The empire I built was never meant to last. Burn it down, and maybe you'll be free. Remember, the real inheritance isn't money, it's the choice to be better than me." I folded the letter and slipped it into my coat pocket. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. That night, I returned to the pier. The mist was still there, and the waves sounded just the same. I lit a cigarette and threw the envelope into the water. Maybe it was over. Maybe not. But one thing was certain, the Mafia's heir had chosen a different path. And as long as I lived, I'd make sure her story wouldn't be forgotten. Because sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about redemption. And that, perhaps, was the most impossible case I'd ever solved. Audiobook script, Chapter 10, The Final Truth. When I opened my eyes that morning, the city felt different. Too quiet. As if the world had stopped, just so I could hear my own heartbeat. Every clue, every deception, every ghost from my past, had led me to this moment. The end of a story I never wanted to write. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching dawn spill between the skyscrapers. The same streets that once smelled of rain and blood now looked peaceful. But I knew better. In this city, peace is only the silence before another storm. On my desk lay a single folder, Case 312, The Hidden Heir. Inside, every answer I'd been chasing for months. Every nightmare I'd tried to forget. And one name, circled in red. Elena. The woman I trusted. The one I protected. Maybe even the one I loved. And she was the daughter of Victor Moretti, the ghost I'd been hunting for half my life. The invisible king of the underworld. And she, his only heir. That morning, the phone rang. "Detective Cole," the voice said. "Calm, sharp, familiar. We found her. She's waiting for you at the pier." I drove through the city without a word. My thoughts were louder than the rain. Every red light felt like a warning, every reflection in the glass, a memory. She never wanted this life. She never even knew it was hers. But blood has a cruel way of revealing the truth. When I reached the docks, the sun was crawling over the horizon. The air was cold, quiet, and there she was, standing by the water's edge, her black coat dancing in the wind. "Elena," I called. She turned. Her eyes carried the weight of everything we'd both lost. "So you finally know." "I didn't want to believe it," I said. "But the DNA, the documents, they don't lie. You're Victor Moretti's daughter. I didn't choose this, Cole. I never wanted his world." "I know." We stood there, between the city that made us and the water that could wash it all away. Then she reached into her coat pocket and handed me an envelope. "Elena, this is what he left me. The key to everything. Money, accounts, property. I could have vanished, but I wanted to end the right way. You're the only one I trust to do that." The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried not paper, but the weight of her past. "If I turn this in," I warned, "your name will go public. You'll lose everything." "I already lost everything. My father. My peace. My childhood. Maybe this is the only way to take it back." The sirens echoed through the fog. They were coming for her. "Elena, you can still run," I said. Elena, shaking her head. "No. I'm done running." Music builds, slow, emotional strings. The officers arrived. I stood between them and her, badge raised. "Let me talk to her, alone." They nodded. She looked at me, one last time. "Elena," softly. "Thank you, Cole, for seeing who I was, not what my blood made me." Narrator, whisper. "I'll make sure they know the truth." SFX, footsteps fading, cuffs clicking, waves. And then, she was gone. Pause 4's, somber piano returns. Hours later, I sat in the precinct. The case was closed. Case 312, the hidden heir to the Mafia. But closure didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. SFX, envelope rustling open. Inside the envelope, besides the bank codes, was a letter, written in Victor Moretti's hand. Narrator, reads with weight. "To my daughter, Elena. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The empire I built was never meant for you. Burn it down, and maybe you'll be free. The real inheritance isn't money, it's the choice to be better than me." Pause 3's. I folded the letter and slipped it into my coat. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. SFX, walking on wood, sea breeze, waves. That night, I went back to the pier. Same mist. Same water. I lit a cigarette, and threw the envelope into the sea. Narrator, low, final tone. "Maybe it's over. Maybe not. But as long as I live, I'll make sure her story isn't forgotten. Because sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about redemption." And that, perhaps, was the most impossible case I ever solved.